Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you. I hope you will participate. Oh, thank you. I hope you will participate and ask questions. I will leave time at the end for questions. And I have a lot of stories about hiring people because I have hired hundreds of people. And I will tell you some of the things that employers are looking for that might help you to land a job, but I will also tell you about the red flags. What are some things you might say or do that will make a hiring manager say, maybe not? And we'll begin today with our PowerPoint. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? Ace the interview? Let me know, thumbs up. All right, great. And thank you all. Go ahead and nice, use the chat. I really like to know that somebody's there because most of you have your screens off. This is called Ace the Interview. And as Lisa said, I've worked at a number of locations in the Bay Area, including New United Motor, where I worked in human resources before the NUMMI plant, before it was shut down. And we hired hundreds of people. We would get up to 750 applications a week. So I have a little bit of understanding. In this workshop, we have an hour. What's it going to take to prepare for the interview? What will you do or say to look confident without looking overconfident? We'll use the STAR method. You may have heard of the PAR or the STAR method. Most of you might already know how to use this, have used it in the past, but I want to give you some hints about how to make it more memorable. Will you ask questions? You should always have questions for the interviewer. When they ask you, do you have any questions? Saying no is the worst answer. That means you haven't given the job much thought. We'll talk about the right questions. Again, my favorite topic, red flags. Why didn't you get hired? People always ask me this. And I will tell you, sometimes the company already has someone in mind that they want to hire, and they are going through the motions of interviewing the pool so that they can justify diversity requirements or whatever other requirements they might have. And I will tell you, even though sometimes they've already chosen a candidate, you do have a chance, because this actually happened to me, where the company had already decided they were going to hire an internal candidate, but I came in so prepared that I wound up getting the job over the internal person, and people told me they were shocked. But it can happen. So even though, you might say, hell, I think they have an internal candidate, if you go in prepared, you always have a chance. And salary questions. This is the biggest question I get. How can I earn what I'm worth? I always ask people, do you know what you're worth? Have you done your homework? Do you know the size of the company? Have you looked at different websites, not just one website like salary.com? That's a great website, but realize people put in their own salaries. How honest are they? By the end of this session, hopefully you'll be inspired to be well prepared and to perform confidently for your next interview. You'll have a formula for success, and we'll learn from each other. People always share what they learned from an interview. There's always more to learn. Just a quick overview of Zoom. Use the chat feature. I'm going to be monitoring it. If you have a question, great. I'm always watching that chat. And I want you to think, go ahead and let's try the chat right now. Answer A or B, one thing you'd like to do better in an interview, or B, the most unusual or difficult question anyone's ever asked you. And I'll give you an example of B. Years ago, somebody asked me what topping I liked on my pizza. Companies have to be very careful and ask you questions that are relative to the job, but sometimes they want to see your personality. They want to see how you handle an odd question. Google is famous for this. There's actually a website where you can see the kinds of questions Google asks, and they justify it. Yeah, you said anchovies, right? And they justify it by saying, we want to see if that person's a good culture fit. Quick story. I heard this from somebody the other day. When Southwest hires pilots, they tell them to come into the actual interview wearing shorts. And when the pilots come in not wearing shorts, they decide they're not a good culture fit because our culture is being everybody is equal. The pilots are not higher order than the staff. We're a team. All right. I would like to answer swiftly. All right. That's a really good thing to think about. We don't want to answer too swiftly because then we might say something that we haven't thought clearly about the answer. Always understand the question. I can't tell you how many times I've asked a question and someone has replied with an answer that doesn't relate to the question. Make sure you understand the question because every question is actually the same. Every question, ask, are you a good fit for this job? That's really what every question is asking. All right, so be prepared. The best way to be prepared is to read the job description. Yes. Why should we hire you rather than someone else? That is a good question when somebody asks, and you need to be very clear about what your distinct skills are, because there are a lot of people, especially in the Bay Area, who are probably well qualified for that job, and they want to know what characteristics, skills, ability, talent make you a better candidate. Yes, and Michelle wrote, talk about a conflict. They're not really looking for lots of details about the conflict. What they're looking for is how you solved it, what kind of critical thinking skills you used, what kind of communication skills you use. They might ask you about a specific conflict that where you're working, there's typical maybe gossiping or people taking credit for other people's work. They might even give you a specific scenario and they will ask you, how would you handle this? Because they want to see your thought process. They want to see how you would communicate your end goal, how you would solve the problem. All right, let's get on to the purpose of an interview. I always tell people when they send in a resume, it's kind of like a menu, right? This is what is on the menu, and it whets my appetite for them to call you in to find out more. So you don't want to load up your resume with irrelevant information. We talked about this in my last workshop, but if you get called in, then something on your resume caught their attention that says you're well qualified for this job. Think about that. Whatever qualifications they are seeking, make sure you can expand on those qualifications. So for example, I'm a human resource manager. When I come in, what do they want to know? They want to know, how well do you manage employee relations? What types of training have you done? What have you done in the area of compensation to make sure our candidates, we're paying them enough, but we're not overpaying or underpaying them? Explain that to me. I'm prepared for those kind of questions because I know that's what's important to the company. I do a lot of research. One of my friends works at Facebook. At Facebook, of course, wonderful place to work. He said he prepared 250 hours for his interview. He interviewed, he said they called him within 30 minutes of leaving the interview and offered him the job. They didn't even offer him a second interview because he had prepared so well and he had impressed them so much. So this is an opportunity to demonstrate not only your skills, but your personality. Do you fit with the people who are already here? One time somebody told me I was too hyper. They needed a calmer person. So that was really good feedback. Nowadays, people are afraid to give you feedback, but your personality comes out in the way you answer interview questions. We understand a lot about how you handle people, the kinds of words you choose, if you talk about something positively or negatively. Even if they ask you about a negative situation, if you could phrase it positively, that's going to be you're going to be in a better position to sell yourself. The position he interviewed was very high level. It was business development director. Yes. All right. So once we have the interview, there are actually 3 stages. What do we do to prepare before? What do we do during the interview? And what do we do after? Quick story I have to share with you. I'm currently working part-time as a human resource manager for a small company. And we recently tried to hire someone. We interviewed about 10 people actually online on Zoom. And we offered this one woman the job. She actually turned it down. We were going to offer the job to our second candidate, but in the time between our offering the first candidate and the second candidate started emailing us saying, have you made your decision? And it was very pushy. It was not very well worded. We thought that this person's personality was almost aggressive. And the bottom line is, we wound up sending him a note saying, no, we're not gonna hire you. So he actually sent us an email saying, what a waste of my time you were. I'm gonna write you up all over the internet and say, what a lousy company you are. And what did this tell us about our decision? Yes, it was the right decision. Absolutely. All right. So what do you do before the interview? Give me some examples. So I gave you one example. I look up as much information about the company as I can online, not just on their website, but I put the name of the company. I want to see their financial reports. I want to see their annual reports online. I want to see what people say about them on Glassdoor. I want to see if on LinkedIn I have any contacts there that I could contact and say, hey, you work here. Tell me a little bit about the company. So what other things do you do before the interview? Anybody? Yeah, know who's on their executive team. Look it up. If you can find out who's hiring you or who's on the hiring team, this is key. I have a friend of mine, she plays golf. She found out one of the people on the team loved golf. And she started by saying, oh, I noticed on your LinkedIn interview that LinkedIn profile that you love golf. And they just hit it off. Mock interview, I think that's a great idea. A lot of the schools in the area and the one-stops will allow you to do a mock interview. Come in with the job description and they will ask you typical questions. You might get something odd thrown at you, but knowing what you can say and getting some feedback on that is really great. Yeah, know who's on their team. Know as much as you can about the person interviewing. If you can find out information on LinkedIn or even put their name in Google and do a Google search, see what articles they've written, where they worked before, what's their background, etc. Anything else? Great, I love that. List of my skills and qualifications. I highlight the job announcement and I see what's placed first because that's usually the most important skill. So look at the job announcement, highlight those skills, make sure you hit those when you're responding. Be very specific. Don't just say I have good Excel skills. No, I've used pivot tables. I know how to graph. I know how to do, this is how I've used pivot tables to do EEOC reports. I would say something like that. I would give an example of my ability to create a report using Excel. Okay. How does one know who the person would be interviewing us? You can ask. Many times that person will contact you. If HR contacts you, you can ask them. Sometimes they will give you the information and they will even tell you you'll be interviewing with the group of our marketing team. Sometimes you could find that if they don't give you the name, you can look up who's on the marketing team. Is it in their annual report? Can you find them on LinkedIn? Yep, profile on LinkedIn. Great advice, Joy. This is where we learn from each other. So preparation is key. Practice your questions, but be careful that you don't sound over-practiced or canned. You don't want people to think, oh, this almost sounds too good to be true. You want to sound natural. Don't want to sound full of yourself. You want to sound confident. So the way to do that is by facts and examples. Instead of saying, I'm great at Excel, you might want to say, I've used Excel for this project. And the result of the project was my company received a grant, something very specific. Yes, be authentic. You don't want to go in presenting someone you're not. You want to work there. And the main thing I always tell people is it's a two-way street. This is where you're spending your life. We don't have that much time on earth. We want to be working in a place where we make a difference, we enjoy it, we work with people we respect. I can't tell you, in my younger days, I've taken jobs for the money and I've hated them. Just because it's great money doesn't mean it's going to satisfy you. So thinking about why are you taking the job? Make sure you really look at that job description. It will tell you what is required. Make sure you're able to fulfill all of those requirements. We already talked a little bit about researching the company. Research salary information. There's salary.com is okay. I really like PayScale. I don't know if any of you have looked on PayScale. Glassdoor is another one where people will list their own salaries. So again, it's kind of like I'm saying I'm 5'3" when I'm 5'2.5". You know, those kinds of things we have to make sure that we get good information. Census information like the United States government websites, they're going to be different for the rest of the United States than California. California tends to pay a little bit more because it costs so much for us to live here. And I'll talk a little bit more about salary in a minute or two. Also, I almost think about us being authors. If we were going to write yes, the slide deck will be available after class. I saw the chat. I want to think about us as authors. If we're going to tell our story, how can we make that a memorable story about an accomplishment? And we're going to use the STAR method for that. I will think about things you've accomplished that maybe people have commented. Even if you were, for example, a cashier. My first real job was a cashier. And when I went in for my next level job, I said, one of the things I'm most proud of as being a cashier is that I had almost 100% accuracy of the cash drawer. In those days, we had to do everything by hand. There were no computers. And so I said I was very accurate and thorough and detailed to make sure my cash drawer balanced at the end of the night. And even though it was like a minimum wage job, this impressed the interviewer. So think about that. What are some accomplishments and how can you weave them into your responses without, again, sounding like I'm, the best thing since sliced bread? Always consider verbal and nonverbal. Now we're on Zoom, and I know we only see this part of us, but I can tell you something someone told me yesterday. He said I was interviewing a candidate and they didn't realize where their camera was pointing. So be careful. This person said this person was interviewing and the camera was aimed at the person's private parts, not their face. Right? You want to make sure you can see yourself on Zoom. What's behind you? I've seen people like going in and out of refrigerators or having an unmade bed behind them if they don't have a Zoom background. So your verbal and nonverbal cues are very important, even if you're not meeting in person. Always do a camera check. Yes, thank you on that. Somebody told me this yesterday too. I have to share you that somebody forgot they had their video on and they picked up their laptop and went into the restroom and did their business while people are telling them, but they weren't paying attention. They just picked up. Anyway, we don't want that. The more you practice, the more confident you are, the more you prepare, you will appear confident. Always get feedback from people and be prepared to do better every time. And I tell people, don't interview if you really don't want the job. It is a waste of the employer's time and a waste of your time. So some people say, oh, I just want to interview for the experience. As an HR professional, I can tell you that is not what I want to be. You can go to a one-stop, you can have a feedback session with a friend, but don't waste company's time if you're really not interested in the job and you don't want the job. All right, so now you're well prepared. What do you do during the interview? And I always tell people, watch the interviewer for cues. People like to see mirroring. So if the interviewer's smiling, maybe you could smile, right? If the interviewer's excited about asking you a question, maybe you can match the level of energy and excitement. Remember, birds of a feather flock together. People tend to hire those who they think they can connect with. So you want to try to watch the interviewer, and you can even get hints about what's the most important skill, talent, or ability they are seeking. They might even, I always ask questions about why the job is open, what are their expectations, and I definitely watch their response, because years ago I took a job and I should have known better, because the person told me that the position was very hard, not only to fill, but to keep someone on board. And after I accepted the job, because it was a great paying job, I realized that the manager was abusive, verbally and physically. He would throw things when he was mad, right? He threw a whole tray of food at me once because I didn't give him a file fast enough. So I wound up quitting too, but then I realized that when I left, the agency that had sent me there in the first place told me, yeah, we've had 10 people there so far. So that's one of the good things about preparing. I wish I had asked that question beforehand, and I wish I had asked more questions during the interview. Why is this position open? Is it a new position, or did someone leave? All right, what do you do when you feel you're not connecting during an interview? This is a tough one, because sometimes we just don't connect with people. I've actually walked out of an interview after being in it for just a few minutes saying, you know what, I don't want to waste your time. I'm not feeling like I'm the best fit for you. I feel it from what they say and what they do. But if I really want the job, then I might say something is that I want to make sure that we're connecting and I'm giving you the information you need so that you can make the decision about you want to say that you're feeling this, that you want to connect with the person. What could I tell you that would help you to understand how qualified I am, or just how much I'm interested in the position? And again, you don't know what's going on in the interviewer's life. They may have had a fight with their spouse. They may have just had a meeting with their boss and the boss is yelling at them that they haven't hired someone yet. There could be so many things going on that you don't know, that have nothing to do with you, and yet we pick up that energy. So don't always think it's your fault. Do the best you can in the situation. And remember, sometimes the employer will put an offer out to someone and that person will turn down the offer. And even though you weren't the first person hired, you might still, the first person that they wanted to hire, you might be second in line. So always, we'll talk a little bit, always follow up and always leave the best impression. During the interview, make sure you understand the question and that you don't talk too much. It's a two-way street. If they are talking, don't interrupt them. Let them tell you as much as you can. Follow it, listen carefully. They will give you a lot of clues about what they expect or what they like or don't like. Make sure you answer the question that they are asking and provide as much specific information succinctly. I remember one boss, a vice president, once telling me, wow, that candidate, she started out great and she actually talked herself out of the job because she just wouldn't stop talking. The question is, should I take notes during an interview? Nowadays on Zoom, that's easy to do. We can't see what you're writing. So I would say as long as you're not looking down the whole time, it's easy to take notes. In an actual face-to-face interview, you can ask the interviewer if it's okay to take notes. Here's the deal. I'm going to give you the lowdown. We live in a litigious society. We HR people are worried about someone suing us for something we said or did in an interview. For example, one of my friends called me the other day. He and his wife just had twins. And during the interview, the employer asked, so tell me a little bit about yourself. And he said, oh, well, I just had twins. And then he wound up not getting the job. Did he not get the job because he told the interviewer? Was it okay for the interviewer to ask that question? Should he have responded that way? And if he did, should the interviewer have followed up on that? Oh, really? How old are they? That's going to be a lawsuit. So a lot of times when people say, can I take notes? Some of us HR managers wonder, ooh, are they trying to catch us in something so that they could sue us in some reason? So just be aware of that. If you have a reason, say, I want to make sure that I'm answering the right question, so I'm going to write it down. That helps me to concentrate. Again, that could be a red flag to the employer. Oh, this person might have a hearing disability. So just be careful with that. All right, so listen and pay attention, answer the question, note cues when you should stop talking. Always stay calm, demonstrate your confidence, even when they give you a tough question that you can't answer. Make sure if you're on Zoom, you've closed the door, you've told the children to stay out of the room, whatever you need to do so that you can concentrate. We'll talk about this formula in a minute, the STAR formula. Make sure you know how to use it and it's off the top of your head. That doesn't seem over-rehearsed, but seems genuine. And always have your list of questions, not too many. You don't want to be, is this a report you're doing? Have 2, maybe 3 questions that you want to ask at the end of the interview. And maybe 1, depending on the time, because they may be rushing you out. If they're rushing you out, there's a good chance that you're probably not going to be considered. All right, I hate to say this, but many times we schedule interviews for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is. And if we have a good feeling within 15 or 20 minutes, we don't want to waste our time or yours. We know we have a better candidate. So I'm just giving you the truth, is that if the interview goes short, then you might not be the person. However, I've had the opposite, where I had like a 10-minute interview. And I thought, okay, that's over. And then I got called and got offered the job. So, it's not a sure thing. But make sure you tell them before you walk out, I really am interested in this job. I'm ready to go. I can hit the job. I can hit the ground running. I've already done this before. I know your company. I've done the research. I hope you will consider me. However you want to say it. Afterwards, should you send a thank you? Absolutely, you should send a thank you because that person took time to interview you. Always follow up with a thank you note. I really love handwritten thank you notes, but I'm old school. I'm from a different era. Most people send an email. Make sure the email has no spelling errors in it. Maybe, and I love to do this, during the interview, handwriting, I would say it's okay to do a typewritten one, but handwritten is very nice. But I would say if during the interview they've asked you something, for example, somebody asked me, how would I quantify hiring numbers? Like, how would I decide how much it actually cost me for a hire? And I said during the interview, I have a spreadsheet on that. And then on my thank you note, I said, during the interview, you asked me about how I calculate the cost of hire. And this is the spreadsheet I've used. I'm attaching it here. So that showed not only that I was listening, but that I had what I said I had. And I followed that up in the thank you, just really short. So if they asked you something and you want to clarify it or you want to give them more information, it's great to include that, but keep it short. No more than 1 screen if it's an email, short little note if it's handwritten. All right, we'll talk about, oh yeah, we didn't talk about that. Thank you. What are some good questions to ask? I gave you one. Why is the job open if you don't know that? Could you describe a typical day for me? Am I going to spend most of the time talking to people? If they haven't already done that. You might ask something like, what do you think is the most challenging part of this job? Or you might ask, I'm interested in how, in your career and how you made it to this position. could you tell me a little bit about your journey and how that might relate to what I could do if I were hired? So be very careful about asking about benefits. Employers generally don't like it when you ask too many questions about salary, benefits, hours, because we're more interested in what you can do for us than what we can do for you. Always remember that. So if you can't find that out, then you should find that out before you interview. And I will tell you this, at my stage of life, if somebody calls me for a job, and of course I'm probably older than all of you, I'm past retirement age, by the way, but I will always say, what is the salary range? And if they say to me, oh, it's $35,000 a year, I will say, thank you. I don't want to waste your time. I'm not interested in, I can't work at that salary. So it's best that we don't interview. But you can ask for nicely for a salary range in a way. I always say, look, I want to make sure that we're on the same page, just in a range. I'm not asking for you to give me an offer, but what is the salary range? If I can't find that out, that's okay to ask, but ask it in a way that that's not your most important question. Oh, there we go. Somebody's coming in. Yeah, ask them what they like about their job, or ask them about the culture. What is the best thing about working here? Now, I worked at Facebook for 2 years myself. There's nothing that I don't like about working at Facebook. It is a fantastic employer, all right? Free food, lots of activities, challenging work. I didn't have to ask that question. All right, follow up. So after the interview, send a thank you note, give them any more information. Also, ask yourself honestly, how did I do? What could I do better? We always learn from feedback that we get or just on reflection. Moving on. STAR method. How can you be a STAR? STAR stands for situation or task, action, and results. Situation is they will ask you, tell me about a time when you did this. It's a behavioral interview question. You want to give them enough context so they know when it happened, where it happened. Then you want to say what you did. Very specific, use verbs, right? And at the end, you want to say the word results. These were the results. And before we move on, I want to answer Adriana Garson's question. You can ask for feedback from the interviewer. Sometimes they will give it to you and sometimes they will not, because they're afraid of a lawsuit. But they will say to you, we thought you did a good job answering the questions. We were really looking for someone with more spreadsheet experience or something of that nature. They might want to say, we weren't sure of the example you used, how it would relate to the type of work we do here. Quick example I'll give you for Facebook when I got some feedback from them is I gave them an example of what I would say to somebody who came in late to work. And they said, we don't have hours. We don't care if people are late. We just want them to do their work. So give us another example. And I thought, wow, I should have known that before I went into the interview. I didn't think I was going to get the job because of that. But that was feedback I got during the interview, right? That's not appropriate until they stopped me from going on to more, more details about that. So STAR method, here we go. What was the toughest work decision you've made? Tell me about a project you were involved in. Tell me about an accomplishment. What was a problem you solved? What was your biggest challenge? Tell me about a time you had to resolve a conflict. So we're going to practice this. I'm going to have a couple of you unmute. We're going to go back. Remember the STAR, situation, task, action, results. I want you to answer one of these questions. Who will be a spokesperson for the group? Give me an example. I'm going to just throw one out. What was the toughest work decision you have made? Who would like to give me an answer using STAR? Who will try? And I'll give you some feedback. Anyone? Unmute yourself. No one?
I'll say something.
Yes, Sheridan, go ahead.
Yeah, it's actually Sheridan's mother, but Grace, that's okay.
Okay.
I quit a job because my boss would not give me my vacation time and insisted that I stay at the office for evening hours in case he needed me for something, which violated FLSA because I was exempt.
Mhm.
So, yeah, for those two reasons, I did quit. And because of that, I was able to collect unemployment insurance because of his insisting that I physically be at the office till 8 p.m. 5 days a week, just in case he had something for me to do, even though I offered to work from home during those hours. So there's one example.
Okay. So while you follow the STAR method, I would tell you from an HR perspective, I would get very scared of that response because it sounds like, you know, you really know the law well and what your rights are, and that's great. I just would worry that you might, you know, you might use some information to get our company in trouble. So I would always focus on the most positive answer you can get, you know, rather than I quit or I got fired, or even if they ask you why you got fired. I mean, I was fired myself at one point, and it was really hard to take because I'd never been fired before. And again, it was a just supervisor situation. But when someone asked me why I left my last job, I would say I was looking for opportunities where I would have more employee relations experience. I was looking, which is true. So you have to believe your reason. And I would be very careful on using the STAR method for a negative situation, unless they ask you for a negative. And even if they do, you want to have a learning. So someone might say, what's your weakest skill? You might want to say, English is my second language, so I'm taking classes to improve my grammar. I know that sometimes I make grammatical mistakes, but I'm learning more and more, and my teachers tell me I'm improving. So even though you have a negative, people don't want to say, oh, I'm such a meticulous worker. I work all the time, and that's my, you know, that's baloney. Everybody has a weakness. So watch those weakness questions. We want to hear a real weakness. All right, Joy has one, resolving conflict. Let's hear it, Joy. You're gonna unmute yourself. Can we hear you? All right, Joy says she has one, resolving conflict, but I can't hear her. Oh, unable to mute. Okay. All right, I'm going to give you an example, one more example. I just used the one to describe a work-related problem. What was a work-related problem? I had a work-related problem in that I found out a couple of my workers were not legal workers in the United States, and they had given me false Social Security numbers. So Social Security came back, and I really didn't want to fire them. They were great workers. So what I did is I went to them and I said, you have 3 days to come back with the legitimate Social Security number. And oh, by the way, I'm also going to give you a name of an immigration attorney that you can go to and see if there's anything else that this attorney can help you with so that you can keep your job, because I really would like you to keep your job. Long story short, they were not able to keep their job, but the remaining people on the team knew that I had done everything possible to help them, and that HR was showing that we really care about our workers, and we're going to do everything possible to make sure we give everybody a chance. And that's what the company wants. We're going to obey the law, but we want to put people first. So that would be an example of STAR. All right, going to move on. Big thing, 10 red flags. Don't be late. Don't show up unprepared. I have people who come with papers and they're rattling through the papers. That no one wants to see that. You should have it organized. If you're going to show me something or tell me something, if you have a portfolio, don't tell me things I don't want to know. I had a person applying for a clerical position. She used to be a model. She's showing me her modeling portfolio. I don't care about your modeling portfolio. I don't have time for that. If you really want to be a model, why are you interviewing for this job? I have stories. I have stories galore that I could tell you things that people have done. People showing up drunk. Of course, now we're on Zoom, but people showing up drunk to work, people showing up, I won't even go there, but I have a lot of stories. First question we ask you is, what do you know about the company? Big example, I was working at Numi, the car company. What do you know about our company? Oh, you make cars. Hello, everybody in the world knows that. You need to know a little bit more than that. Talked a little bit about lack of confidence. Specific examples, don't just say, I know Excel. I've taken intermediate Excel. I know how to do tables. I know how to do graphs. And I keep using Excel because that's a very specific example. Poor communication skills, not being able to answer my question. Giving me answers to a question I didn't ask. Going on and on when it's obvious you've said enough. Which leads us to emotional intelligence. Am I picking up cues from the interview that it's time for me to listen rather than talk? Overemphasis on what you are worth. Oh, I was making this in my last job. I wouldn't even consider less than that. It's like, okay. Any kind of discriminatory comments. I have stories about this where people have said things that you would not believe about other races or religions, or, somebody will give me an example to star like, oh, these people were taken off work because they blah, 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 they were of a certain religion and I didn't think that was fair. It's like, whoa, be careful, because you're showing me something about you that you're more concerned about what other people are doing than your own work. So that's what I'm getting at. And any kind of negativity, especially when I ask you about your boss, I'm watching your face. Tell me about what would your boss say about you, or why did you leave your last job? And I could see people like, you need to practice answering this question so that you don't look guilty, you don't look deer in the spotlight. You need to be as positive as possible. You might want to say, my former boss and I really worked on different projects, so we didn't interact as much as I would have liked to, which is a true statement. So try to think something positive, even if it's a negative situation. Try to phrase it as positively as possible without lying. And are you easily distracted? Number one thing for me, cell phones. Put your cell phone away, put it on silent. I wish I could put this phone. I should put it in another room, sorry. But make sure that you're not being distracted, because people are saying you only have a half-hour interview. You can't pay attention for half an hour. That's a big red flag for me. All right, we're going to go quickly because I want to make sure that we get to questions. The biggest question I have is, how do I negotiate salary? I will tell you from my own experience that I have devalued myself by not knowing what I was worth and not knowing what the job is paying. Do your homework. If you are asked for a salary, don't say it tentatively. You can say, I would like to make this. Now, it's against the law for them to ask you what you were making. That's a new law in California, but they can ask you for what you would like to be making. So what are your salary requirements? Know that I always say salary is not the biggest thing. Total compensation, more important. Do you have health benefits, medical, dental, vision? At Numi, of course, they're gone. I think they gave us too many benefits, but a good example is managers received a car every 2 years and free gas, and they paid our auto insurance, and they paid our gym memberships, and I won't go into the whole thing, but my salary was lower than I expected it to be. But when I looked at total compensation, it was higher. So you need to think about not just salary. How many days off do you get? How many vacation days do you get? Is there a sick leave policy more than the 3 days which California grants you? What kind of job is it? Does it require you to work long hours? Now, salary, people go, oh, well, we're salary. Well, that's not the way salary was meant to be. Salary doesn't mean you're a slave. Salary means you might work 45 hours one week and 35 hours another week, 50 hours one week, and then whatever. So sample language on how you can negotiate salary. Yes. when they ask you your salary, you can say, I've researched, and you can tell what you've done for the type of industry and for the amount of experience I have. My research shows I'm within this range. I'm hoping that we could come to an agreement for something in this range. If not, I'm open to being flexible on compensation. Here's a great example. When I had a job as a HR manager, again, the salary, I should have known better, but long story short, I received a lower salary than other people at the same level, but I negotiated extra vacation time because I had 3 children. And it was more important for me to have 3.5 weeks vacation rather than 2.5 weeks vacation. All right. So say I'm willing to accept that salary if you're willing to grant me this. Another example at Numi is they offered me the job, but they said, oh, your benefits don't start for 3 months. I'm like, 3 months? That's a lot of money. So what they did is they gave me a sign-on bonus because they couldn't give me the benefits right away. It wasn't in their pay structure or whatever, but they gave me a sign-on bonus that covered my benefits before I started. So there's lots of things you can do. Again, it depends on your title. 3 things that make you valuable to a company. Number one, how many people can do that job? What are the skills needed? Of course, a surgeon is going to make a lot more money than a cashier because only certain people can do it. How many people live in that location or that area? Do we have to recruit from overseas? Or, for example, Facebook, they did contests and they got people from all over the world that were software developers because they couldn't find the right people with the right skills. And they paid for them to be shipped over with their families. They put them up in hotels or housing until they could get settled. They paid for all kinds of things for the right person. Obviously, they're not going to pay the same thing for someone who, for instance, maybe pushes some paperwork that they can find almost anybody in the area to do that. So number one is how many people can do the skill. Number two, what is the industry? High tech is going to pay more. Healthcare is going to pay more. So what is the industry? What is the standard for that industry? And number 3 is the location. You're going to make more in San Francisco than you do in Bakersfield. All right. So those are the 3 things that influence salary. Other variables are your amount of experience, how your degree, if they're looking for a degree, your ability to speak multiple languages, those types of things. So do your homework, know when to bring up salary. Usually it's the second interview. Unless they're ready to go with you on the first interview, I wouldn't bring it up. Negotiate total comp. And then know to say, no, I can't do it for that price. I have walked away from jobs saying, I would love to do it. I just can't make a living doing that. All right, we're going to have questions here. What if you aren't interested in healthcare? Yeah, that does affect salary. So you need to let them know that. You can say, look, I'm a veteran. I already have benefits, or I have a partner. I already have benefits, so I won't need them. Is there a way for me to get compensation in lieu of that benefit? And a lot of companies, they will even give you, they will give you some benefits based on your health exam. Sometimes they give you a health exam, and if you're non-smoker and you're very healthy, that makes their insurance go down. So sometimes they give you like a gym membership, or they'll give you extra, like the premium healthcare plan. Again, it just depends on the company. Some of the better companies will actually even give you a 401k. I want to say this because I wish somebody had told me this. When I first moved to California, before most of you were born in the 70s, I was here and I applied for a job at Clorox. I did get the job. It was a great job. My first, high-level job. And they offered me stock. I was, 20 years old or something. I didn't know what stock was. I had no idea. I said, I don't want to pay for stock. They gave you like a 15% off. You could buy it at a low rate. Had I purchased that stock at that time, I would be a multimillionaire right now. Okay, if I had purchased it and so take advantage of company benefits if they offer them. if they offer you stock options or 401k or matching, anything like that. A lot of young people say, oh, I can't afford it. I can't afford to put money away. You will regret it. That's my only caveat that I wanted to mention. Questions. We have a few minutes for questions. How do we avoid any comments from the former boss? Well, listen to this. Your boss should not be giving any former comments. If they call to verify your employment, most companies will only verify your dates of employment and your title, which you have given. You will have to give permission for that as well. But if you have something negative to say about, okay, somebody's coming in. If you have something negative to say about your boss, I would keep it to yourself and just, or phrase it in a way that you might want to say something like, well, I was really interested in growing the program. My boss was getting ready to retire, so he wasn't. One of the reasons I left is I wanted the ability to use my creativity in growing a program. So if you have to phrase it something like that, you want to phrase it as positively possible. You don't want to say my boss was a jerk. I've had people tell me unbelievable stories. I have to add this. Make sure you realize the interview starts before it actually starts and ends after it actually ends. I have walked people out to their car. I know this is terrible to say, but I've walked people out to the car, and after they're done, they think I'm their friend because they like me, and they start telling me. I had a woman who told me the reason she was leaving her job is because she was sleeping with her boss. What does this tell me? I was actually going to hire this woman. And now she tells me she's sleeping with her boss. I'm questioning her decision-making ability. I'm questioning her. Why would she tell someone she just met this information? I did not hire her. So be careful of letting your guard down. You are always interviewing when you're on site. They watch you. I've watched people how they interact with the receptionist if they're coming in for a real job. Are you polite or are you rude? I watch people. If I introduce them to the team, what do they say? What are they looking at? Are they trying to look at screens with screen covers to get information? You know, I watch. And so I have to tell you as an HR manager, yes, the interview is important. But nowadays we spend a lot of time interviewing to make sure we have the right candidate because it is a litigious world. And I have been involved in numerous lawsuits that some of were frivolous and time wasting and costly for the company, and we don't want to go there. Yeah, if your executive, see, and a lot of companies won't allow you to give a reference anymore. HR is saying don't even give a reference on LinkedIn. Companies are fearful. So you could, if somebody asks you for a reference and you can't get it from that particular executive, you might have to go to another one. You might have to go to a previous job, and you could be honest. This does create a red flag for me, though, if you can't even get one person to give you a reference. Any specific advice for Zoom interviewing? Yes. Be careful with your backgrounds. I've had people do like cosmic things that make me really dizzy. Make sure you have good lighting. If you're an older person like I am, go on Zoom and watch some videos about how to make you look a little more energetic and young. I hate to say that. I mean, we shouldn't be looking at youth, but there are videos that make you look better rather than tired and old. I would say, again, it's a two-way street. Make sure you're listening. You can easily take notes without them seeing you, but avoid distractions on Zoom. This is the biggest thing I see. And some of the distractions are unmade beds and posters that are inappropriate, like F-word posters behind you. Come on. Don't you look at what you're on your screen? All right. We're just about out of time. I hope that you got something out of this. And I hope that my experience, again, it's a prejudice experience from my experience. And I'm sure other HR people would tell you different things. However, I know that many of the HR managers I work with, they may not tell you some of the things I've told you, but they do have some unconscious bias based on their years of experience. All right. So they'll think if somebody talks negatively about their boss, this person is going to be a negative influence in our workplace. So we don't want to hire that person. All right. Thank you, Joy. All right. If you don't know how to answer the question, you can say, I'd really have to think about that and I will get back to you, and you could answer it in your follow-up letter. Never let them see you sweat. Just say, I'd need to do a little more research and I don't want to give you incorrect information. Is it important to have a LinkedIn account? I think it depends on the position you're applying for. A lot of people do look at the LinkedIn profile. I think it's a good way to get hired if you're looking for a job. Again, don't lie. All right. That's it. I hope I was real. I hope you take what I said from the heart. I want everyone, especially those of you looking, it's a tough economy right now with so many people out of work. And I hope if you are looking for a job, you are successful. Good luck to all of you. Thank you. Thank you all.